What's a moment that was so brutally embarrassing, it made you want to rage quit life? I was 17. Julia was the love of my life at the time. I had never met anyone like her in my young life. I think that's why I found her so attractive. We were childhood friends. We grew up down the street from each other. I had known her family my whole life. Things between us changed when we got to high school. She was popular amongst our peers. I was not. We drifted apart to the point of barely interacting with each other outside of random occasions where our families would get together and we'd have small talk about events at school or whatever was going on in pop culture. How I viewed her completely changed one day when she came into school wearing a cut-off Slayer t-shirt that revealed a fresh tattoo of that Latin phrase Carpe Diem. It wasn't the sentiment of the tattoo. Looking back at it, I think it's kind of funny. It was the audacity she had to walk into public school in a conservative town with it and own it. I realized that day that I had to say something to her, and it just so happened to be prom season. For 2 weeks I struggled to work up the courage to ask her to prom. When I finally did, I decided that I would slip a note into her locker when I went on a bathroom trip during class. I had written, "Will you be my angel of death at prom?" with my name signed at the bottom. The next day I had third period chemistry with her. I could feel her gaze from time to time throughout the class. We made eye contact a couple of times. I was certain she had seen my promposal and was going to reject it with the wrath of God if she ever decided to say anything to me about it at all. When the class ended, she walked right past me out the door without so much of a second glance. I was not too shaken up about it. I don't necessarily expect anything different. I was actually proud of myself for actually giving it a shot. I followed everyone else into the hall to put some of my books in the locker to get ready for fourth period. When I opened my locker, I saw my note taped to the back of it. Brutal. I pulled it off and examined it closer. To my surprise, there was a new line added to my initial writing. "Yes, but only if we wear red." I was shocked. I wanted to jump through the roof, but I figured any reaction could reverse the decision. So, I played it cool, and slid the note in my pocket. My good luck streak would end there. There was a stomach bug going around school and I had caught it unknowingly from a friend while I was over at his house after school one day. It was 2 days before prom. I figured I could wait it out and see how I felt come prom day, but nothing was going to stop me from going to that dance with Julia. The night before prom I found myself hunched over the toilet or sitting on it for half the day. The only thing I ate on the day of prom was Pepto-Bismol and Advil. I was still feeling a little nauseous when I arrived at Julia's house to pick her up, but I knew the meds would hold me down until the dance was over. They did. Prom was a blast. We did indeed wear red, and we looked great in our couple's picture. Toward the end of the night, Julia told me that her parents were letting her have a few people over at their place for an after party. I knew this, but I told her I couldn't come because I had been feeling a little sick. She looked disappointed. She grabbed my face with both hands and pulled me in about 6 inches away from hers. She stared into my soul and told me that I needed to come and that I didn't have a choice. So, I reluctantly agreed. The after party was fun. There were more than a few people. It was practically the entire prom. It was interesting seeing people I had known for most of my teenage years in that context. My opinions of a lot of people changed. Some for the better, some for worse. I was content just sitting in a corner and people watching. I didn't want to dance because any movement risked my stomach getting upset again. At some point during the night, Julia danced over to me and told me she had something to show me in her room. She pulled me up by the arm and led me to her room. I wasn't naive. It was prom night, she was my date, and we were alone in her bedroom. I still remember the feeling of her kissing me for the first time. It was magical. At that moment I had to make a decision. I chose to risk it all. We were right around third base when we heard a knock on the door. Julia yelled occupied, and giggled. Then from the other side of the door we heard, "Your dad's looking for you." I had known Julia's parents my whole life. They were really cool people, but I don't know if any parent is cool with finding their daughter naked in bed with their friend's son in their house. Julia sprang up and began throwing her clothes back on. I followed her lead. She took 2 seconds to fix her hair before she spun to me to fix mine. She wiped her lipstick from my cheek and I pointed out that she had a hickey forming on her neck. She started freaking out. She opened the door and pushed me out before sharply whispering, "Distract him for me." I took 2 steps before hearing my name from my left. When I turned I saw a hand reaching out for a handshake and instinctively I put my hand in his and greeted Julia's father like I always had when I was younger. I immediately saw the excited expression dissolve from his face. He took his hand out of mine. He stared at his hand for a second. He asked if I had just come from the bathroom and chuckled about how my hands were still wet. I nearly had a heart attack as I realized my mistake. I had just wet his hand with his daughter's bodily fluids. He asked me if I had seen Julia. I was petrified, so I just forced a nod. He asked me where I had seen her, so I pointed to her bedroom door. He opened the door and saw her in the mirror applying makeup to her neck. He paused for a second. Then, his face curled up into disgust as he realized what was going on. I could only watch. He spun around to me. He looked around the party. He lifted his hand up to his face. Then, he stared at me. The same hand he used to shake mine curled up into a fist. My heart was pumping out of my chest. Shame, humiliation, and embarrassment swirled around in my head. I wasn't even done fully processing what had just happened before he swung his fist right into my gut. As soon as his fist made impact I could feel it coming. I swear I puked and farted at the same time. I fell to the ground, not willing to stand up to this grown man. He stormed off to his room and slammed the door shut to keep himself from ending my life. As I lay on the ground I heard snickering coming from the rest of the people at the party. The adrenaline made it so that I couldn't feel the pain as much as I could the embarrassment of my mistake. I was certain they were clowning me for folding so fast until I saw someone point at my butt. It was then I knew the situation was much worse than I thought. As I regained feeling in my legs after the adrenaline wore off, I felt a wet, mushy sensation running down them. I had aggressively soiled my pants in front of the whole grade. This was no ordinary turd that managed to stick its head out and kiss my boxers either. This was violent and explosive diarrhea that had shot out so hard that I could feel it slide up my back. The rest of high school was brutal for me. I had earned the nickname Scatman and had to wear it with as much pride as possible. I don't know if I would have made it if I didn't have Julia by my side. Today, Scatman and Julia are happily married with 2 kids. But I will never forget the day my father-in-law knocked the poop out of me. I doubt he will either.